Hello, everyone. My name is Nathaniel Smart, and I am here today to talk about findings and recommendations for performance issues. I am the one who has been hired to perform the organizational diagnosis over the last 3 weeks, and I want to thank each and every one of you who are in this boardroom for taking out the time to listen today. We should spend about 15 minutes to talk about, you know, some of the things that I found during the diagnosis. Upon completion of this presentation, we'll be able to identify the three factors that determine the failure or success or of change efforts. Those three factors are what we decided should be focused on initially, and they are the environment, which includes the internal and external environment, organizational relationships, and performance improvement system. We'll be able to identify ethics of organizational assessment, understand issues from the leadership and follower perspectives, review recommendations and options for improvement. You won't be able to see my speaker notes. However, if you desire to have these slides after the presentation, I will be glad to send them to you. First of all, we're going to talk about the environment, the internal environment. Employees, leadership, continuous improvement, processes and procedures, organizational culture, just to name a few, are all elements of the internal environment. Employees play a significant role because they're the ones who perform the actions. Therefore, we need managers or leaders need to make sure that employees' skill set is constantly being developed so employees can effectively perform uh, and achieve those goals. Leadership has a responsibility in developing their direct reports and modifying their style, being flexible in order to address certain workplace complexities. Continuous improvement initiatives should be a priority as we should always find ways, better processes to service our client. Processes and procedures. In my organization, they consider them a living document because they're always changing. When we're coming up with better ways to service our clients, we always have a process for everything, and those ways should be reflected in the processes and procedures. Now, once we develop our employees, our leadership, building our leadership skills, coming up with continuous improvement initiatives, have better processes, all these things will be reflected in the organizational culture. Another aspect of the environment is the external environment, which includes natural environment, laws, international environment, competition, just to name a few. Natural environment includes things like weather conditions. Like, for example, in the wintertime, we know Texas has extreme weather, which prevents our employees from driving to work. So we have to ask ourselves, are we providing our employees with all the tools and the necessary equipment to work from home and not interrupt the flow of the business? For example, the COVID-19, that's another, was unforeseen. Fortunately, our employees are able to work from home. Managers, are you reaching out to your employees, making sure they have everything they need in order for them to continue to service the client? Laws, HR policy. I notice some managers aren't up to par on all the laws, making sure that they have management training and workshops on compliance, on ethics, things like nepotism and favoritism, making sure that they manage, when they interview, make sure they ask the right questions because we want to eliminate liabilities, and legal liabilities. International environment. We have an office in China. I noticed that the manager is not up to par on all the laws. For example, if we have a U.S. holiday, we make that employee observe that U.S. holiday. Is that legal? We just want to make sure that we get with HR or compliance and make sure we understand the international laws so we can manage effectively in the virtual environment. Also, competition. Are we responding to competition? For example, are we distinguishing our products and services in a way that will attract more customers and maintain customer loyalty? That's one way because our competition is constantly doing that. So, in order to stay on competitive edge, we need to make that a priority. Another aspect of competition. Maybe we need to look at our compensation package. I've heard an employee say that that we're paying under the industry. So maybe we need to look at revising that so that we can attract uh, better talent. Organizational relationship is another factor that we focused on, and that just entails communication. Basically, communication is the key to every successful endeavor. We want our employees to perform better and have high morale. Research shows that it depends on how our leaders and managers interact with our employees. Our employees, it's important for them to be empowered and to feel connected. In turn, it raises the level of morale. It keeps the retention rate high and productivity. Customer satisfaction. Are we interacting with our customer, making sure that we're meeting their needs and making sure, that we're keeping them happy? Interaction among other partners in the ecosystem. There's a diagram on the side of the presentation that gives you an example of the partners in the ecosystem. This is a supply chain management company, so we just have to make sure that we stay in contact and communication with our suppliers, our partners, our outsourcing agencies, our consignees, our shippers, our carriers, and of course, our customers and employees. Everybody who makes up the social system, we need to make sure that we're interacting. Our last factor we looked at was performance improvement, and we looked at it from the aspect of employee performance and overall organizational performance. Um, Employee performance. You measure employee performance by way of appraisals and um, employee evaluation, but we want to kind of change our approach because from being in the environment during my diagnosis, I heard a couple employees say that they dread going into their evaluation because they feel worse when they come out. Well, we need to try to train our managers to make that a pleasant experience instead of looking at areas of improvement and focusing on them as you're not doing this, you're not doing that, you need to improve. We need to look at them and present them as an opportunity for development. We need to kind of change it into something positive so that our employees can feel much better about the appraisal process. External feedback by way of surveys, questionnaires. We have a site, we have a portal where our clients, our customers, our carriers can go in and update things. Maybe we need to put a survey out there so they can fill out, understand their perspectives and their perceptions, their complaints, their concerns, their compliments. And maybe we can take that information and look and see what we need to improve on, which leads me to my next point and come up with a corrective action process. Take that. What do we need to improve on based on the voice of our customer? What do we need to change? Auditing is very important. Have an internal auditor to audit the process. For example, our company has what you call layered auditing. They have somebody who's familiar with the process, who's familiar with all the tools and software and technology to sit with others, maybe newer people, to make sure what they're doing is the most optimal process, uh, poking holes in the process, asking them questions, and uh, giving them better ways that they could perform. For example, a lot of our work is done in Microsoft Excel, and there was an employee who was taking a significant amount of time to perform a task in Excel. Well, this internal auditor sat with the employee and noticed the employees performing the task the longer way, and the internal auditor created a quick macro that performed the task in 2 minutes as opposed to 30 minutes. So internal auditing has been proven in my experience to be very successful to the point where it saved a head count. Ethics of organizational assessment. Uh, when I researched this, it came down to corporate social responsibility, which includes environmental safety, business integrity, culture, equality, fulfilling the responsibility toward all in the social system, decisions by others other than upper management, environmental safety. We talked about that early, inclement weather conditions, things such as the COVID-19, making sure that our employees are safe, make sure they feel safe, not only as it pertains to the weather conditions, but also in the workplace, because sometimes we have managers who do not make their employees feel like they're in a safe space. So we need to make sure that we focus on that business integrity, best practices, making sure that we're doing what we can and make sure we're doing the right thing, which brings me to my next point, the culture. I know the motto within this organization is doing the right thing. Are we living up to the mottos and slogans? It's one thing to have them on banners and signs and imagery in the organization to present a positive culture, but if it's not reflected in the actions, it does no good. Equality, are we treating our employees fairly and with respect? You know, employees of different backgrounds. Uh, while I was out there doing my diagnosis, I had an employee, and I keep him anonymous, to tell me that he doesn't think he's being treated like the other employees due to his disability. Now, the manager may not be aware of this, and the manager may not be intending to treat the employee as such, but that's what the employee is feeling. That's what the employee is perceiving. So we need to work on management to make sure that they are uh, they're aware of their environment and that they're sensitive to the employees. Fulfill the responsibility toward all in the social environment. We talked about that earlier. We want to make sure that we perform best practices with our shippers, our suppliers, our consignees, our end users, and everybody who makes up the social environment. Decisions influenced by others other than upper management. It's a mixed review. Some employees say management considers their decisions, others say management does not. So we want to make sure, because the employees are the ones who do the work, we want to make sure their voice is heard and that they're included in the decision making process. Leadership and follower perspective. From a leadership perspective, we talked some leadership, and some did admit that they need to work on adapting their leadership approach to different complexities and workplace situations. They have one style, they need to learn how to come out that mode and kind of employ a dynamic style that will allow them to be flexible. Respect toward others of different backgrounds. We talked about that, responding to people of differences, motivate others to accomplish goals. Some leaders have issues with that. One leader told me that that when he was evaluated by the director gave him feedback that he was acting in an individual contributor's role rather than a management role. So therefore, he wasn't really developing his employees, but rather operating like an employee. So management needs some training, effective communication, applying theory to practice. When these managers are going to workshops and seminars, are they taking away and applying what they've learned to the practice and to the workplace? Learn to adjust when there are limited resources. Do our managers have the ability to come up with workarounds, or when they're in a difficult spot, or when they're in a limited, dealing with limitations, can they still be flexible? Do they have the ability to come up with a workaround and not allow those limitations to interrupt the business? Follower perspective. After we talked with some followers and we asked them if anything could be changed. Give me some elements that, that's in your work environment that could be changed. And they came up with leadership, communication, training, processes, and customer service, which all, involves the culture. Uh, Say leadership, they replied by saying leadership needs to learn how to lead effectively and communicate. The communication needs to be clear. Our processes need to be updated. One employee said that the results were questioned a couple of times, and this particular employee said the reason why they delivered in such a manner is because the process stated. So the process says one thing, but the customer requirement is another. So we need to make sure that the customer requirement is accurately uh, reflected in our processes. And of course, customer service, that's how we improve upon our customer service. So, based on the diagnosis, my recommendation is to continue to focus on continuous improvement, keep that a priority, mitigation strategies for our natural environment, uh, natural disasters, things of that nature. Although we can't prepare for everything, but if we bear that in mind, we can certainly reduce the effects. Enhance relationships, continue to work on fostering better relationships among everyone in the ecosystem. Effective communication, data collection. Now, data collection, when we really want to know if change works, this is what I do in my organization. We take historical data and compare it with the new data and just see if there's a reduction in calls, uh, maybe in time, just kind of do a deep dive analysis of the information and see which is more beneficial. And which is more beneficial. I mean, the new way might be more beneficial. You might discover that the old way is more optimal, but you really won't know until you have the data. The data tells the story. So, data collection is a highly recommended suggestion. Feedback, we talked about that. Surveys, instruments, finding out what the customer wants, finding out their complaints, hearing their voice. This is um, how we can service our clients better. Tools and metrics such as KPIs. Some people use models like the PDCA, Plan, Do, Check, Act model. Some people use the SMART analysis. Some people use this. Some organizations use the SWOT analysis. These are some of the tools that will not only measure performance, but it also measure team performance as well. Here's an example of a survey. This is one of the surveys that I use when I'm providing consulting services to get, the perception of the, employee. So this is an example of, you know, finding out how they feel. Again, thank you for your time and attention today. Do we have any questions or comments? If you think of any questions later or any comments, my email is at the bottom of the slide, my phone number as well. I will be giving each of you my card in case you have anything later.